Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. Mr. Terry, as I continue my search for historical knowledge found here on the internet. Alright, today's video is the Beer Hall Putsch in 1923, and this is by a channel favorite, Simple History. Alright, this is a topic that I was interested in because I was just talking about this in my class, or at least just kind of mentioning it as an important event to the history of the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler, as they made their approach to basically start a revolution and taking down the Weimar Republic. However, I don't know a ton about it, so kind of more for selfish reasons, I wanted to check this video out, and I'm glad that you're joining me as well to do this, so we can learn about this together. So the original video link is down below. Make sure that you support Simple History, give them a sub, like, view, all that stuff. You'll definitely like a lot of their content. They tell just really, really cool stories. All right, links to some other stuff in the description as well, but let's go ahead and get started.
The Beer Hall Putsch, November 8th, 1923.
There they are.
The interwar period in Germany was one of extreme political and economic instability, and by 1923, the country was in a state of turmoil. The Weimar Republic, Germany's first attempt at a true democracy, was seen as weak and had already seen the election of several different chancellors and 9 government cabinets. The Ruhr Valley, the center of industrial production, was under occupation by the French, who were attempting to ensure payment of First World War reparations.
Sure. Now, again, we're talking 1920s here. A lot of people think about the Depression, right? Great Depression, that starts, later in like 1929, then into the early 30s. And a lot of people don't understand that if you want to call it a Great Depression, Germany started many years before that. I mean, virtually when World War II was over. Ruined the economy, the reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles were devastating to the German economy. And then you had, again, this with the fall of the German Empire and that government and the birth of this Weimar Republic, which is a democracy, criticized for not being able to really fix problems. There's unemployment rates, hyperinflation, and you may or may not know that, but people say that this economic conditions are what kind of sowed the seeds for more extremist ideologies like the one the Nazis are going to develop here in Germany.
Across the whole of Germany, political uprisings on both the left and the right were taking place. The whole German nation was outraged at the Treaty of Versailles that was imposed on them as a diktat, a dictated peace.
Right. And it absolutely was. The Treaty of Versailles went into World War I, forced upon Germany because Germany was losing the war, and the Allies did not, skimp on basically trying to destroy Germany, as they put way more probably emphasis on the cause of the war than they should have, right? Because there's a lot of causes of World War I, but something the Germans had no choice in signing. So if you're thinking, man, why did the Germans agree to all this stuff? Well, they had no choice.
And government's acceptance of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles reinforced the stab-in-the-back myth and made many Germans hostile to the new Weimar Republic. Hyperinflation was running rampant. The German people lost confidence in their own currency, and money, printed in bigger and bigger amounts, became worthless. The German mark, which in January had been already a dismal 17,000 to the dollar, had by December...
By the way, they show, I don't know if they're going to get to it, but there's these famous pictures you can find of what looks like people in Germany burning these big blocks, these bundles of cash, right? And that was true, and they say that the reason was that the money had become completely worthless, in Germany, to the fact that it was more financially profitable to burn money than other types of fuel source to heat your home. So yeah, they would throw that in there. What an amazing thing to show. It's such, I like to use that image when talking about hyperinflation as a perfect example of how worthless money can actually be.
Already a dismal 17,000 to the dollar had by December plummeted to 4.2 billion to the dollar.
Jeez.
A loaf of bread cost as much as 200 billion marks.
Which is just, it literally means nothing. It means it's nothing. 200 billion marks, people don't have that. You know how much money that would physically be? It's you can't, I guess you could make bigger banknotes, but it virtually means the money is worthless. You have to find other ways to do it.
Despite a good harvest that year, farmers were refusing to sell their produce because of the risk of price drops, adding food shortages to the list of problems facing the German people. People resorted to
200 billion.
barter, using products such as coal or sausages as currency. The inflationary crisis.
Yeah, that's what it means. Like, money became so worthless, so you had to go back to commodities, right? Old school bartering, like in ancient times, where you didn't have like currencies because that didn't mean anything, right? Currencies like paper money or coinage are only worth what your society deems it, because it has no actual functional use. But something like coal or meat is way more useful. It actually has intrinsic value because you use it for something physically.
Catastrophic for most Germans, had economic, social, political, and psychological effects. The virtual collapse of the economy in 1923 helped to foster the perfect breeding ground for various extremist political movements, including the Nazi Party. Adolf Hitler, as well as several other nationalist politicians, believed that the time was right to start an open revolution against the Weimar regime. Taking inspiration from Mussolini's March on Rome the previous year and Napoleon's march from Elba to Paris in 1815, Hitler planned to force the hand of several of Bavaria's leading politicians.
Yeah, I always like to talk about in my classes the influence that Mussolini's actions and the rise of his group in Italy had on Adolf Hitler, because he felt that their struggles were similar. And with the black shirts, as they were called, Mussolini's group, a lot of them were former soldiers that were still very nationalistic, and Hitler felt that his, he had a similar backing with that, and so it's like his version of it, because they took, was it 30,000 or something of the black shirts Mussolini took to take over the government and basically pushed him out, forced the king to basically put Mussolini into power. And yeah, Hitler thinks that it's an identical thing, but, well, we'll see.
Coerce them to join with him and then march on Berlin. The men who Hitler planned to coerce, collectively known as the Bavarian Triumvirate, were General Commissar State Commissioner Gustav von Kahr, General Otto von Lossow, commander of the Reichswehr, German army in Bavaria, and Colonel Hans Ritter von Seisse, the head of the Bavarian State Police. All three men already had nationalist sympathies and were not afraid to ignore direct commands from the central government. Planning for what would become known as the Beer Hall Putsch, or the Munich Putsch, did not get off to a good start. The date of the march was originally set for the 10th through the 11th of November, but on the 7th, Hitler discovered that Kahr would be giving a speech in Munich's Burger Braukeller beer hall, and that Lossow and Seisse would also be in attendance. Unable to pass up the opportunity of capturing all three men in one location, the plans were moved up to the very next day, the 8th of November. His basic plan went as follows. Hitler and his men, including several high-ranking Nazis such as Hermann Göring, were to surround the Burger Braukeller, interrupt the proceedings, and gain assurances of allegiance from Kahr, Lossow, and Seisse.
So it's like, they're obviously going into this willing to force these officials into compliance, right, with a sign of force. But is that what they're doing? Are they hoping for them to like to convince them, like truly convince them that they should join the cause of the Nazis, or what? Or is it like a hostage situation? That's kind of going through my mind right now.
When this was done, a signal would be sent to Ernst Röhm, who was waiting in a second beer hall with more men. Upon receiving
all the
said
beer
signal
halls
from Röhm, all of his men would then capture several strategic buildings around Munich. For Hitler, things did not run smoothly.
Never do, right?
The evening started well enough for the Nazis. Around 8:30 p.m., Hitler, along with his accomplices and bodyguards, burst into the beer hall in the midst of Kahr's speech.
You don't interrupt the man's beer. I don't care what it's for.
Hitler jumped on a table, fired a couple of shots into the air, and proclaimed to the crowd of stunned onlookers, "The national revolution has begun." Using a mixture of exaggerations and outright lies, Hitler explained that the building was surrounded by 600 men, that there was a machine gun in the lobby, and the local police and army barracks were already occupied, and that both the state and national government had already fallen. Kahr, Lossow, and Seisse were then led into a side room at gunpoint, where Hitler explained to them his intentions. He also told them that he had 4 bullets in his gun, 1 for each of them, and the 4th for himself if they failed to come to an agreement.
Whoa, I didn't know that. if they failed to come to an agreement that they would all die, Hitler's trying to say, hey, this is going to work, or I'm even going to end myself. Jeez.
Chile refused to join with Hitler, saying he could shoot him if he wanted. In the meantime, the crowd in the beer hall began to get rowdy. Hitler was not a particularly well-known or popular figure at the time, and
of course they're rowdy. They've all been drinking as well. They're angry, they're hostage, they're drunk. I don't know if they're drunk, but you know what I mean.
Did not take him or his band of Nazis seriously. With the 4 men at an impasse, Hitler returned to the main room, fired a shot into the air to silence the crowd, and took to the podium. What followed was described by one eyewitness as an oratorical masterpiece.
I've heard this.
Hitler, in the course of just a few sentences, was able to completely change the mood of the crowd from one of derision to one of ardent support. He did so by appealing to their sense of nationalism and encouraging within them the spirit of revolution.
It seemed like the thing with these early speeches was, you know, part of it is going to be him attacking these people, right? And insulting them and maybe appealing to incompetence and things like that these people had. But then would also try to get a unifying message. So it wasn't just him throwing out frustrations and you know, selfishly like that. It's like you break it down and then you build the people up, right? And, you know, talking about unity and that, no, Germany is great. No, I'm not just some hater, like, you know, of Germany. Like, that's not it at all. I'm a, you know, patriotic and that sort of thing. And that, you know, we have brought people over to be intimidating, but then also inspiring. And a lot of people bought into that. Again, you got to think context here. It's the early 20s. Things are not going very well for Germany. And this message was received well by many.
In the meantime, Max Erwin von Scheibner-Richter, a leading Nazi and one of the key strategists behind the evening's events, had left the beer hall to collect General Erich Ludendorff. Ludendorff was one of Germany's preeminent wartime leaders from the period of the First World War. After the war, he became involved in ultra-nationalist Völkisch politics. The Nazis hoped that his involvement would help to legitimize their position, and Hitler planned on making him the commander of the armed forces after gaining power.
Okay, so what went wrong?
After Ludendorff's arrival, Kahr, Lessau, and Seisse gave their grudging but public consent to the scheme. It was at this point that Hitler made a critical
I hope they all held hands like this. I really do.
Mistake, deciding to leave the beer hall to see to matters elsewhere in the city and placing it in the command of Ludendorff. When Hitler returned a short time later, he found that all 3 members of the Triumvirate had taken the opportunity to abandon the cause and leave the beer hall. All 3 then renounced their declarations of support.
Of course, this is not surprising at all. Do they truly expect these guys to convert in a way willingly when they're virtually having a gun to the head and enforcing this? Like, they're not actually being convinced, right? They were maybe pledging this allegiance early because they probably feared for their lives, right? And then when that pressure is gone, then you see what they're really, you know, really about.
Without the help of the Triumvirate, Hitler knew his planned national revolution was destined to fail. But nevertheless, he and Ludendorff put together a plan to march into the center of Munich and take over the city.
He's got one of them at least.
Noon, the 2 men, along with the rest of the Nazi revolutionaries, set off with around 2,000 men. They made it through the first police blockade unscathed, but not the second. A shot rang out, and there was a quick but intense firefight lasting roughly half a minute.
By the way, I definitely think that, you know, after Mussolini's armed storming, right, and revolution of the government, that definitely put the German police here on high alert, knowing that, you know, that they could be vulnerable to this sort of thing too. So I think they were probably the German military or police here way more prepared than they probably were over in Italy.
Scheibner-Richter, who at the time was linking arms with Hitler, was shot in the lungs and died instantly, dislocating Hitler's shoulder as he fell to the ground.
Ow.
After this, the revolution fell into immediate disarray. Hitler crawled away at the first opportunities, and Goering was shot in the leg. Ludendorff attempted to embolden the men by continuing to march towards the army, but they didn't follow. He was peacefully arrested as soon as he crossed the line.
Yeah, he's walking, you know, thinking they're all on his back. Eventually gets to the line. It's like, let's get him, boys. And he turns around. Oh, I'm the only one. I surrender.
By the time the guns fell quiet, 14 Nazis and 4 state policemen had lost their lives.
Wait, what's the number?
Guns fell quiet. 14 Nazis and 4 state policemen had lost their lives.
Okay.
In the immediate aftermath of the putsch, several of the surviving Nazis, including the wounded Goering, escaped over the border into Austria. Hitler instead sought refuge in the house of a friend just outside Munich.
He's crying. My revolution failed. They hit me.
It didn't take long for the police to track him down, and he was arrested 2 days later.
Yeah. It's like, what?
This should have been the downfall of Adolf Hitler and the
this
Nazi
should be
Party. But
it should be this guy throw in prison, lock away the key. Obviously a threat. He's a traitor. This should be the end, right? That should be the end. Little tiny spot on history for Adolf Hitler. You'd think, right?
the resulting trial proved to be a blessing in disguise. Hitler and his co-defendants were clearly guilty of treason and should have faced lengthy jail terms.
Right.
In addition to his crimes, Hitler was not a German citizen, meaning that he was eligible for deportation. Instead,
because he's Austrian. He's Austrian.
Judges gave him the opportunity to showcase his views to the German public.
Oh, no.
At the end of one of Hitler's speeches, one of the judges was heard to remark, "What a tremendous chap, this Hitler." The chief judge, George Neidhart, was a nationalist sympathizer who allowed the court proceedings to be part open and part closed, and, even more surprisingly, let the defense decide what would become public knowledge. This had the effect of allowing Hitler to craft his public image, and by the end of the trial, he was a national celebrity. Hitler impressed the German public by his eloquence and the fervor of his nationalism. The trial happened in February 1924, just before the elections, and helped the Nazis to become the third largest group in Bavaria. At the culmination of the trial, Hitler was sentenced to the minimum possible sentence. That was just 5 years in the fortress prison of Landsberg.
So this must be... you would have to assume, just based on this information, that the success, I guess, of his statement in court is what led to him getting such a slap on the wrist punishment. They did an armed revolution against the government and the police and stuff like that. Okay, nearly 20 people died. An armed insurrection. And his speech was so good that they gave him the minimum possible sentence. Again, that's so weird. It doesn't add up, because we were talking about like him going to prison and for this and like in my classes and stuff, and so many people were like, why he got out? He wasn't in jail very long for that. Like, how is that possible? And I guess if we're really putting this idea that he won so many people over in court, that's why the punishment was so soft. And if that's true, it just attests further to the man's speaking ability.
Of which he would serve only 9 months.
9 months! 18 people died? Fomented a revolution against the government? 9 months.
Sounding draconian, in reality, the cells of the fortress prison were comfortable and well-furnished, and inmates were allowed to receive daily visitors.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Hitler used his period of
being able to write a book
to further consolidate his thoughts and to write Mein Kampf. He would later describe this period of confinement as free education at the state's expense. He emerged from Landsberg a reinvigorated man with a newfound sense of purpose. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Beer Hall Putsch was that it taught Hitler that the way to win power in Germany was by following legal means rather than violent revolution.
I'm talking.
One of his cronies, Alfred Rosenberg, claimed that November 9th, 1923, gave birth to January 30th, 1933. the day that Hitler was made Chancellor of Germany.
I could see that.
Hitler himself commented in 1933 that the events of the 9th of November 1923, with its blood sacrifice, proved the most effective propaganda for National Socialism.
I could see that. That makes sense.
Subscribe and click the notification bell for more history videos.
You got a Treaty of Versailles video? Man, this channel's so good. All right, let's talk about it. All right, so this video helped me piece together a little bit about this connection between this event and it catapulting him into stardom. Because there was a lot of missing connections for me there about how this failure ended up working in his favor and how he was able to, again, avoid a more harsh punishment and things like that. If again, we're kind of oversimplifying this down to him being a good speaker and able to convince people to just kind of soften the blow of what he tried to do, right? And so that was useful for me to be able to, I think, communicate that message there. I don't know, but what do you guys think? I'm still like dumbfounded for the fact that he went basically unpunished. You saw like his prison sentence, if you want to call it, was just him being almost like a house arrest, well furnished. He's able to sit there and just like do whatever he apparently he wants there. He's writing his book, and of course by using those 9 months to really think and fester. And then again emerges as a hero instead of some kind of like crazy terrorist. You know what I mean? And I think that says a lot to the German public at this time, that through this stuff, that it had a positive effect rather than being the opposite. A guy doing an armed insurrection and going to jail in this ends up becoming famous and supported, and then continually supported through the 20s. And then you saw when he actually comes into political power in the early 30s, this 10-year period between the Beer Hall Putsch and his actual getting into political power 10 years later. But amazing that could happen. And just as more testament to what the state of Germany was like, that he could use this to cement his position and his growing platform. So anyways, this is very informative to me. Tell me what you thought. Go down into the video comments and you can talk about this. You can come over to our Discord server. There's a link down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this and just kind of, I guess, the general conversation of the rise of Adolf Hitler into these conditions. Is it surprising to you? Is it not surprising to you? I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'd love to get a conversation going. So definitely do that. All right. Again, links to some things down below. The original video link is down there, and links to some other fun stuff too. So, all right. And with that, we'll see you next time. Bye.